A man walks into a synagogue. Under normal circumstances, this is not necessarily a bad thing. But this particular day, this particular guy didn't necessarily go to seek any level of salvation. Robert Bowles, full of hatred and bile, went for one glorious, undignified, cathartic release in which he destroyed and ended the lives of 11 people. It is true that he was a lunatic and he wrapped himself in a reality that is almost incomprehensible to the normal person who's going about their day. Completely incomprehensible. Coming up with fantasies of Jews and immigrants that are somehow destroying America, and that he was some kind of patriot and he needed to go in and end the lives of innocent people, innocent to the degree that a person can be innocent. Human beings with lives, families, and loved ones, people who cared about them. They were raised, they had lives. And they went there with that particular day thinking that it was going to be an ordinary day. Bowles, armed to the teeth, seeing as he's in America, armed to the teeth, had different ideas. 11 people were killed in Pittsburgh. My wife and I were sitting in a sushi restaurant here in Portugal. And I see it flash up in a language that I can't necessarily understand, but I understood Pittsburgh, and I totally understood thick-necked guys walking around with weapons and heavy weapons, and I could make out the language enough to realize there's been a shooting and there's been multiple fatalities. Let's read the story first, and we'll come back to it, to my perspective on it. Well, you already know my perspective on it just based on the way I told this particular part. But I want to bring up something that no one ever brings up, because this is my perspective of events. Who is Robert Bowles, the suspect in the Pittsburgh Synagogue shooting? For months, Robert Bowers had been spewing anger in post after post on the web, calling immigrants invaders, distributing racist memes, and asserting that Jews are the enemy of white people. Right there. This idea of connecting Jews and immigrants. It's amazing. Then, on Saturday, moments before the police say he barged into a Pittsburgh synagogue with an assault rifle and 3 handguns, he tapped out a final message: "I can't sit by and watch my people get slaughtered. Screw your optics. I'm going in." Who is he talking to? What the fuck is he talking about? I have no idea. This is a reality that this individual has wrapped himself into and has found it this thing that he needed to do, destroying the lives of 11 innocent people. A terrorist, a domestic terrorist, white rage, incomprehensible again to the average person, but here we are nonetheless. The authorities said Mr. Bowers, 46, then killed at least 11 people in and around the synagogue. Tree of Life, a spacious building with stained glass windows and golden memorial tree and Torah, rescued from the Holocaust. It was the Sabbath, the synagogue's busiest day. The attack was one of the deadliest on the Jewish community in the United States history. The actions of Robert Bowers represent the worst of humanity, said Scott Brady, the United States Attorney for Western District of Pennsylvania. Please know that justice in this case will be swift and it will be severe. This is the gentleman. Police arrested Mr. Bowers. I'm amazed that they were able to even take him. Who had 21 guns registered to his name. 21 guns? 21 guns. But no, there's nothing wrong with this at all. This picture makes perfect sense. The police arrested Mr. Bowles, who had 21 guns registered to his name, according to the representative Mike Doyle of Pennsylvania. Officials say he was not known to law enforcement before the shooting, and the search of the Pennsylvania Judiciary database shows only a 2015 traffic violation to his name. Mr. Bowers, Jews are the children of Satan, reads Bowers' biography. Mr. Bowers lives a 25-minute drive from the synagogue in the brick apartment complex on a dead-end street where he was frequently spotted smoking cigarettes outside. A neighbor said she could not remember seeing him speak to anyone, not in the 2 years she lived there. The shooting came just days after federal authorities arrested a man in Florida charged with sending mail bombs to prominent Democrats. The man, Caesar Sayoc, had posted vitriolic and at times violent messages both online and on stickers attached to the windows of his van. Political rage fueled Mr. Sayoc, who railed against liberals and immigrants and echoed saber-rattling rhetoric of Mr. Trump's rallies, according to the people who knew him. Mr. Bowles frequently reposted anti-Semitic content that Jews controlled the nation on doctored images of the Auschwitz concentration camp. The Gates lies make money. Another post said, "Open your eyes. It's filthy, evil Jews bringing in the filthy, evil Muslims to this country." That makes utterly no sense. That makes absolutely no sense. This is kind of my point. This is a warped reality. Mr. Bowles also extended his anger to the president, who he accused of not going far enough for political goals. Donald Trump wasn't racist enough for Mr. Bowers, and so he was angry at Trump also. This was a Trump supporter that didn't get or didn't believe that Trump went far enough in attacking immigrants. Days before the shooting, he wrote, "Trump is a globalist, not a nationalist. There is no Make America Great as long as there is a," and he asserted, "a slur for Jews infestation." He connected Jews and immigrants in some weird fantasy. Look, it is perfectly legitimate to criticize Israel for its behavior with regards to the Palestinians. The United States props up Israel because Israel essentially is the attack dog for the United States in that region of the world. It arms it to the teeth. Israel uses its will to essentially assert its will in that area. That's criticizing a state, however. That has everything to do with them being a colonial power that wants to essentially, let's say, pacify the population of natives that lived in an area to which they decided to invade, in the same way that the United States did the same thing to the Native Americans. That has nothing to do with them being Jews. That has everything to do with them being a colonial force. There's a massive difference in those things. This is different. This is absurd. This makes no rational sense. He goes into a synagogue and mows down 11 people because he has some fantasies about Jews and Muslims and immigrants. This makes no rational sense. It is fair to say that this man is a lunatic. Fair point. It is not fair to say that this is specific to the individual. What I want to make the point here is that we need to stop looking at this stuff from the standpoint of the individual. Let's stop pretending as if the individual is outside of some context of everything else. Like he is separate and distinct from everything else that takes place in a society. This individual, that person, Bowers, came from a society, came from a cultural context. The things that are in his head got into his head because of the cultural things to which he was dealing with. But all of that, every last bit of it, to some degree, came from the society to which he existed. It is fair to say that Donald Trump has stoked a certain degree of rage in the country. It is not fair to say that that rage originated with Donald Trump. He was able to harness it. True. But for him to harness it, it was there. There is something in your society that is creating lunatics. We have a sick society. It's time to acknowledge that. We have to ask the question of what is taking place in the society itself that creates the individual like Bowers. That's the harder question to ask. It is easy to try to say that this is isolated and specific to the individual itself. It is harder to ask what in your society perpetuates and creates scenarios, systems, cultures where people like this is vomited up. What? You have mass shootings every day in this country. That's fucked up. That doesn't take place everywhere else in the world. That takes place here. You have an opioid epidemic that's all throughout the country. Nobody cared when this was African Americans. When this started affecting whites, everybody cared. The life expectancy in the United States in comparison to other nations is depressed by a level of like a decade or more. I'm asking you, what in your society is causing this level of sickness? Is vomiting up people in this way? The Make America Great crowd, the guy who was sending bombs to the various Democrats who were saying bad things about Donald Trump. Do you know that guy had called in a bomb threat because he was scared that they were going to cut his lights out? It is going to be worse than 9/11. He was living in an area of shit and piss. He was living in his mom's basement, or in his mom's house. I'm not going to call him his mom's basement. Grown man. Grown man. Person who foreclosed on him, Munich, was the person that Donald Trump appointed. Essentially, he's supporting the person that's putting the boot on his throat. And he's supporting them vociferously. There's something wrong with that situation. What in your society is creating people that behave in this way? This is not individual behavior. It's easy to say that the individual themselves make certain individual choices and those individual choices lead to certain outcomes. It is more right and more honest to say that there is something in the society that was put into that person's head and that person acted on the stuff that was put into that person's head. That person did not pluck that out of the ether. That something in the society itself was propelling that individual to behave in the way that individual behaved. And the way that that individual expressed his bowel and his rage was to end the life of 11 innocent people who went to synagogue to pray and worship. I'm not going to keep this long. I hate seeing these. I hate seeing this. All right, I'll leave it here. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. Thanks all.